This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
This is the hardest thing I've ever written or spoke about, or anything like that. This is it was the worst year of my life. Not the easiest to edit, let's put it that way. I could write about it all day long, and I have, but reading back on it becomes hard.
Letters, even if you don't intend to send them, sometimes are a good way of organizing your thoughts.
Yeah, I would say that's great. That's a great way to look at it. And they say like journaling is a good thing to, like, psychologically proven to, work really well, get things out of your head,
Oh, totally.
Or it goes somewhere deep down in your subconscious.
I'll bet this is really in there when it comes to your subconscious. Speaking of letters, we are going to bring back a book that we spoke about in season 1. This book came out shortly before we started recording season 1, and it's called The Tangible Formula for Love and Loss, Despair and Joy, and the Triumph and Failure of the Collective Will, Part 1 by Shane Bugbee. On the spine of the book, the title says Scapegoat of Love No More, which is the title of today's episode. The reason why we haven't talked about this book since then, whether it's on our podcast or in person, is because today we're talking about a subject that was sort of planned on as we're going to talk about this in the future, but we weren't quite ready to talk about it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is about Shane Bugbee's former marriage and some of the pain and some of the ups and downs that have gone on since last year.
Yep.
So, a lot of this book did not make any sense to me when we first talked about it. If anything, it felt like, okay, this is a spooky book. I opened it to a page that made me nervous. But there was a lot of very sexual content that felt very personally driven. And I just plain didn't understand it. But when you told me more about yourself, that you had ended a marriage and etc., that you left Oregon to come back to Chicago, it did feel like there's something I need to get to know before talking about this again. So here we are again with this. Listeners, be warned. I do not know Shane's ex-partner. I am somewhat biased in this episode because I only know Shane. However, I'm doing my best, or at least I hope I'm doing my best here, to stay in the middle as possible and just help shed light on what Shane would like to share today. And know that we're focusing on Shane's experiences, and in no way is this episode to drag any names through the mud or cause any sort of rifts between anything else that happens. So I think, Shane, I thank you for your generosity in revealing what's been hurting you for this long, and hopefully I can help pull this thorn out of your paw today.
Oh, that would be great. I feel like it's a forever thorn in my paw, though, but I would like to not limp.
Absolutely. So, I saw that in the beginning of this book, there was a letter from your pal Nikki. And it really tied a lot of what we talked about before together because it mentioned Dr. Stephen in it. And it made me feel so happy that I knew who this was talking and who all of this, and it just felt so, within such a cold book, it was such a nice ray of light. It was so warm to look at. However, before all that, the first page you see with anything on it is what seems to be you. You're crying, you have either bags under your eyes or you have a black eye. One of the two. It's a very distressed looking you, and it says, "I'm dead. Happy?" And it didn't really hit me until this time around how much this hurts to look at. Next to it, your title page, it really hurts to look at this, because seeing this heart with a dog inside, I know who this is, and I'm sure it hurts to revisit this. Listeners, you should check out this book, by the way, that we're going through. I'm trying to give a little information about this without being too vague, but if you really want to know what I'm talking about, this book is available for sale, and I do strongly recommend finding it. This, by the way, is not a pitch for Shane's book, but I'm using this as an attempted neutral to help push along a little bit of what we're talking about, so it doesn't feel like a he said, she said. The bottom of the title page says, "Shane Bugbee produced this work in a living hell on the run, on a train." Published by Michael Hunt Publishing. Volume 2 will be produced in joy and not so raw. Love is the guide. So, you were on the run, and you took a train.
That's true.
Being on the run, does this mean that you left without any warning? It just kind of snuck out in the night? Or was this a planned leaving?
Well, it wasn't. It was both. Oh boy, this is it was both. I better stick to the questions and not wander.
You can wander. It's okay. I'll call you back.
It was both. As I saw the marriage crumbling, and this has been going on for 5 years. So as I went to therapy, those things, I guess, happen when you go to therapy. You sort of like can ruin relationships or make them. And this is sort of how that went. So it'd been years, but up in the last year at this time, September, October, November, it became real clear that this was just not working and wasn't going to be fixed. My ex wasn't going to go to therapy with me, and it just wasn't working. And so at some point, I tried to my idea was maybe we can have a couple of our favorite meals and discuss old times while I pack up. And that wasn't doable. It just wasn't happening. I was told that I wouldn't get a divorce, and it was just weird. But I left in the middle of the night somewhat. I went and visited a friend and then left the car at the train station and got on a train to Chicago. It was I felt in peril. Let's put it that way. And I don't want it, and unfortunately I set myself up to sound paranoid or things like that for people that are looking at this as their own relationship versus the extraordinary life that I've led before my wife came along, my ex, and the extraordinary life that she joined. And so part of that, is just like, I felt in peril for good reason. A lot of Amy's exes ended up getting beaten up or something like that when she exits a relationship. So that was starting to line up against me. So I left in peril. Yes, I left afraid. There you go.
I wonder if the preconception that you came off as paranoid comes from the stigma that we're still getting out of as a society of men can't be victims.
Well, that certainly felt that way from a couple angles when I was on that train and I called people and tried to explain to them my situation. It was definitely felt like something like that, like man up, or how could I be leaving if this person is that sick or whatever? And my explanation is that I how can I deal with it? I'm not a doctor. If the person won't go see a doctor or anything like that, I can't. There's nothing I can do but remove myself from a really dysfunctional, toxic relationship that was becoming really toxic. And as a man, I'm not going to be, as stuff ends, you're going to look to leverage possibly things to your favor. And I didn't need to have something happen. I needed to leave in peace and not have something happen where I could be in trouble or accused of something that I didn't do. And that's where it was getting to that point where it was just unsafe, and so, yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm not making any sense.
Oh,
but
no. If anything starts to sound unclear, I'll definitely ask some further questions. That's okay. Now, just for my own knowledge as well as for the listener, is your ex a Satanist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she is.
So this comes into something that just crossed my mind. If someone chooses to deal with what they're doing, however they're dealing with it, they are doing what they willed. And I don't think that you stepping in and correcting that person because it helped you, if they decide to flat out refuse the same form of help, that shouldn't be put on you and put on you by others as you should man up and stay there. That's very unhealthy to think. And I think that unfortunately, if someone wants to go a different way, that was their choice.
Oh yeah, it was definitely, we definitely made our choices, and I stayed around years too long, but I definitely knew I was in danger, or we were in danger. It was just growing to a really unhealthy point, and there was nothing else I could do. There was nothing else I could figure out how to do, and so that was it. I I live a weird life, and part of my life is like, unfortunately, you start to have to in these situations, you start to take an accounting of what's real and what's not real. And part of the reality is, like, as an artist, I'm worth more dead than alive, stuff like that. So those are like factual things that you start to account for and go, boy, I could be in peril here. You know, it's hard to figure. It's hard to talk about this. That's for sure.
Something this brings forward is there's a page that has handwritten in it. Love is to sit here and die in front of you, my love. I sit in front of you every day, sorrow and pain on my face, yours to enjoy. As I sit and dream, as I sit and die in front of you each day a little more. At the bottom of the page says, and she laughed at my profile. My head has become fat. And intellectual now, vain. It's cut off a little bit, so I had to kind of figure out what it said. This really seems to cut really close to a lot of implications of what happened in your relationship. And this definitely sounds like your head is a trophy.
Yeah.
The bigger the
Yeah,
head,
that.
the bigger the head, the bigger the trophy.
That's interesting. That book is I hate to call it a book because it's definitely a work of art that I put out in the way I put it out because it, you said it's cold and upsetting. I don't realize that stuff until you said it back. But that is something that I started to do before I made the decision to leave. Through artwork, I get to see truths in myself. I get to figure things out. And I started working on zine called Angela Fairless for Mayor. It was for the zine exchange. And when I started to do it, I started to see a lot of things that I would turn a blind eye to, or I was able to be manipulated through aggression. Like basically, if Amy yelled at me, I sort of felt like a little kid, and I snapped to, you know, looking forward, let's say, turning the blind eye, like, okay, that didn't happen. And so that book is definitely a piece of art. It doesn't make a lot of sense to many people probably, but that part was basically, we would sit across from each other in the morning, and I would really enjoy our morning coffees early in our relationship. And then at this point, there was just no conversation. She would just stare at me. And, no matter what I would say, I'm miserable, all this stuff, it was just silence and staring. And so, and almost like a sadistic pleasure.
This is frightening to me because I feel like this whole week we've been cosmically connected at the head, because the page I have bookmarked next is, "Your silence is making me sick. You seem to like that."
Yeah.
No joke. I was on that page waiting to mention it, and here you are bringing it forward. Listener, you should know some occult behind the scenes that went on today. I got messaged by Shane about 4 a.m. his time, but when I woke up and saw it and responded, it was 4 a.m. my time. Just very, very interesting supernatural occurrences have been going on in preparation to this, and I can't help but feel like this is possibly putting my head on the platter a little bit of, oh, this enemy, oh, connected, Wonder Twin. So, let's go on. Last episode, we talked a lot about how you felt like the Me Too movement resonated with what was going on in your life. And a lot of on and off mic, we've talked a lot about gaslighting. We've talked a lot about a lot of psychological and emotional abuses that you went through. I don't want to make you relive any traumas, because I think that that's not quite the point of this. But I was curious if there was anything you wanted to reflect upon or get off your chest regarding what happened to you.
Well, with the Me Too movement, it was a real interesting thing, as I spoke about on that last show, but it helped me see both sides. Something I was living, like, as my psychiatrist would tell me later, like, wow, you are in the woman's role, and your wife is acting like a man, like what she would consider as a typical man. And so I was able to see what gaslighting was and what was going on. Like, also, like the zine, I just was able, like, when you have boundaries and you start to learn what these things are in therapy, when I had memories, my boundaries were now intact. So the memories were like, hey, why didn't I say something there? Hey, why didn't I state my boundaries there? So my memories now had boundaries where they didn't have them before. They were just me turning a blind eye like I always would. And it was just like when I was a child. So then those memories had something. But I was able to see, like, in the Me Too movement also, how women would have to have a shadow self to be sexual, would have to hide their sexuality and stuff like that. And I sort of understood that, like how damaged women might be in their lives because of all the stuff they have had to go through. But the thing that bothered me the most about our relationship was we come from this satanic relationship, a public satanic relationship, where I have pushed forward that philosophy in a different way than it was going when I first understood it. And I have been instrumental and influential in a large way. And so not only did it make me feel weird when I looked back and thought, boy, we have this philosophy where we shouldn't have to lie to each other. We should be able to do what we want. And how could this have happened to us? And how could this happen? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I believe in that satanic perspective of having something like there's an honor or there's justice. And some people that get involved in that world like to use it to cover up their criminal behavior or their lack of ethics, and they're corrupt. They have no values, and so they like to use that as a cover. And I think there's another, and they use words like justice or honor as a sliding scale. Well, as long as I honor thyself, justice for me. And I don't think those words have a sliding scale when, I think you could have a court of Satanists try a Satanist based on them having a lack of honor or not understanding what justice means for the whole. Justice is something that's not individual. It's probably for the whole of the society. And I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but that's what came to mind whenever you said.
Yeah. You see it a lot now, especially on the internet, where this sliding scale, the moving the goalpost is going on, where a lot of people justify any behavior as, oh, I'm just hailing myself. Oh, I'm just doing it for myself, when it's just self-justification and it's not necessarily an identification as a satanic person.
Right.
Absolutely no benefit in what is being done except for narcissism.
That's how I see that, and especially as I was going through it, like, so the to be able to use, hey, I'm a woman and this is my story, is justified to me in a lot of ways. But then you meet into our really weird lifestyle, which is this satanic perspective and public, and so that right there that's where it confounded me. I was like, I can't understand how this is happening. And then I started to understand it was happening on a very sadistic level. There was a sexual energy to deceit, or there's an idea of let me prove my loyalty to you by being unloyal to this person. Let me prove, how evil I am by being deceitful to this person. And so those things are all tied to like this pathetic nostalgia of looking back 100 years to what evil was, or looking back to the Marquis de Sade and taking him as a hero, rather than the mentally damaged, corrupt person he was. I mean, and I'm not opposed to sadism. I would say I'm 20% sadistic, but I think when you explore those worlds when you're older, like when you're younger, it's different. But when you're using that stuff as therapy at 50, 60 years old, and that's the only therapy you have, it's probably not the best. Or as you, Nannerl, said, I think at the end of one of the episodes, maybe not, but in the S&M community, it's
last episode, yes.
Safe, sane, and consensual. And I think sadists tend to make, sometimes at least, they go outside of that bounds to get their sadistic rocks off. And anyway, I'm probably being confusing at this point. I feel like I'm just confused totally.
Me too. Me too. I'm going to seg into 2 pages. In the middle, it says, I was religious in love, and I failed. From my interpretation, I don't think you failed. I personally, getting to know you in the year we've known each other, knowing you only as this person post leaving, well, I actually met you a little before you left, and more recently finding out more about what you've been through in your relationship, I don't think this is failure. Maybe you felt this way at the time because this is from a little while ago, but I personally think it's quite brave of you that you left. And I think that this is a good example of addressing what you need to do to survive and addressing that you cannot return to an abuser and expect things to get better.
Yeah, I guess when I put that failure in there, it's because I became religious. I believed in the concept of love so strongly. I believed that the person that I was in love with loved me and wouldn't hurt me. And I think, I was looking for someone who was going to protect me and I would protect them. That's how I see love, as someone who's willing to hold you when you're sick or protect you when you fall, pick you up. And that's how I see it. And I think now I see some people see love as a aspect of pride. Like I'm proud that I have control over this person I'm walking with. And so I think some people have, love is pride, pride and control. And I had never, that's far removed from how I see love. So I just became religious in love where I didn't ask questions anymore, even though I knew better. Like, as a person who studied the dark side of human beings, I sort of got that what was happening behind my back, but I just didn't feel good enough about myself to bring it up. Like, this is the person have to be with because I'm not good enough to have anyone else. And, all those things, you sort of work out in therapy. And so, you should stay a skeptic even when you're in love. You should sort of,
Being good enough is something I think a lot of victim of abuse, especially women, go through, of the feeling of being good enough. And so you go back to what's familiar. Like we talked about in episodes before about you felt as if you married your mother.
yeah.
It's definitely the idea of class and privilege comes into play oftentimes when we think we found a soulmate. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And unfortunately, we as humans tend to go to what's familiar because we think it's safe.
And that's exactly what this was. When you pull it apart, it becomes as simple as like, this is the kind of treatment that I dealt with was something I was used to. And I did marry my mother, and we talked about that stuff in, I think, the Me Too episode.
Yes.
It's true. But like I said, the more therapy I got, the further away from that stuff I went. I was like, wow, this is, fucked up. I don't know, fucked up and toxic. And
what you went through that was behind your back, when you say you turned a blind eye toward it, what are some reasons why you felt like you needed to do so?
Well, probably just insecurity. I'm not really sure. Like I said, it was just me replaying my childhood, probably. Like my mother would take me out with her when she was having her affairs. And, I do this, wanting to do this radio show to, get back my reputation or some sort. So I didn't know that a lot of that stuff, I didn't know anything was happening behind my back. And I think sometimes it was presented that I did. And so I didn't know that. I just believed, like it was like religion. Like the best thing I could explain to is being religious, like just believing, even though there's evidence to the contrary, you just continue to believe.
Back when you had an Anchor podcast that you had posted when you were still in Oregon, because I could hear the Oregon drippy rain in the background, you talked a lot about love for a long time when you had R.I.P. Shane Bugbee up. And a lot of it was quite confusing at the time, but when I think back upon what you talked about, I think I know what you're talking about, because it is very it sounds like a sense of prose, like religious prose that you're speaking about. But this idea of believing in it, is it something you came up with on your own, or were you coerced into feeling that way by someone else?
Well, believing, just being told, like when you see something and someone says, that didn't happen. You didn't
Oh.
hear that.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't see that. I knew what I saw, but I just went into okay, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to explain that beyond that. It seems bizarro, like I was in a cult, like.
Can I ask even further a slightly, I guess, slightly agitating question? Your book has a lot of illustrations of vaginas in it and other parts of the female body, and I'm curious, were you ever physically seduced into believing?
Oh, well, that's for certain. That's I guess how you could say I would be groomed is, and we talk about that in the validation episode. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sex to me is validating. So, is I guess, and one friend said, Shane, you're so easy. All someone has to do is love you, and you'll do pretty much anything they say. And I was like, yeah, that's so right. And this was recently. A friend pointed that out to me. Like, you know, what am I going to say about that? I don't want to be a person that doesn't accept love,
No,
but I
but I
also,
think this is some of the dangers you may have lacking pretense as well.
yeah,
It can
prob,
be, it's a very good quality that you are like this, but this was unfortunately a big learning experience of the dangers of it as well.
my psychiatrist says I'm almost pathological with my naivete, stuff like that. It's not easy to think about or admit, admitting weaknesses here, but that's just the way it is, I guess. Um, yeah, yeah, that's it.
Um, there's a page that says, it mentions about how you're a fucking satanic. What is a pornographer? It means I have a high standard when it comes to my decadence. It also means my decadence has no bounds, no limits. It also means my will not be compromised, nor my character, nor my political self. I need not hide my sexual self. And then next to it is an illustration saying power attracts the leech. And even if these are non sequitur, they go quite hand in hand. I'm guessing this has a lot to do with some of your artistic endeavors with adult film, but also this is interesting because it's revealing in terms of the shadow self that women go through, the acceptance of that. And it seems like you expected that acceptance too, and perhaps there was a double standard.
Yeah, I'm not sure I even understand what's being said right now.
Do you know what the political self part? I used green sticky notes to refer to the ones that I had a question mark to, and then yellow for yikes and things like that. The yikes is not toward you, by the way.
It's okay. If it were, it's okay. I don't mind. I like to hear the honesty of that book, for sure. Um, you know, I guess yeah, boy, that it's hard to think about that specific writing.
The sort of a duality to that is a handful of pages down that mentions something about someone else's shadow self, which clearly wasn't too shadow. Of cuckold? Okay, sounds fun. And I bet it sounds fun to you too. And you can't see your wedge is anti-fun, anti-love, anti-free thought, authority for one and all. And do you know what this reminds me of? Is that when we were talking about women in your life, and we were talking about the usurping within your zine. And I can't help but think about that. It sounds like there's a bit of double standard of who says what, who's submissive, and this anti-fun, anti-love, anti-free thought. This is like a cult.
Yeah, and that's funny. That was written. It's funny you bring that one up. That's something I wanted to bring up. Like when I say I don't know what was going on behind my back, and people should know that, because at some point I wrote that after Trump won the election, and it was basically about Republicans talking about cuckolds and stuff. They were using
calling
that term.
people cucks all the time.
They were using that term to make someone seem weaker. And so I used it in an empowering way I was talking at them. Well, I posted this on my Facebook, and it was used in a way where some people who understood what was happening in Astoria, Oregon, shared that to basically say, I am admitting to being a cuckold or something like that. They would, and that was put forward, and I'm not that I see anything wrong with that. That's where it becomes like non-consensual to have my reputation drug into these things and stuff like that is the upsetting part. It's not the person that my ex-wife is that I hate. It's the person that she pretended to be that I hate. I don't mind anyone having a joy in their life or being themselves sexually, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. Not to myself, but I admit I did a little bit of researching to get ready for this, just to get my cards right. And there's been claims from people who don't even know you guys that well that you are being paranoid, or that this person sounds nice. I don't think they are like that. And I think that is beyond relatable from anyone who has been gaslighted or abused or hurt so deeply as you apparently have. Someone is, oh, that person's so nice. Oh, that person seems nice. I just don't agree with blah, blah, blah. And it's a very complicit, unhelpful thing to state. At that point, I feel like that form of manipulation oftentimes is sort of aligned to the idea of weaponizing tears. It's an idea that has been really articulated in the past couple years by the news, especially about women of a certain demographic. And it can be quite dangerous, I think, and it's something that I don't think is studied enough as a form of privilege, that not every person, not every woman has this power to be able to do.
Well, certainly, I would never think that I could, and I have an excellent imagination. Could never imagine that I would win the popularity contest between me and Amy. She presents a really great face. And so that's neither here nor, like that doesn't surprise me.
And I think that most relationships, to be fair, people put their best face forward when there's beef.
Yeah, but Amy's always presented herself in a way where, like, 9 days of pie. And that became an event for her, where it was my birthday, but people were celebrating her. And
Let's talk about 9 Days of Pie, actually.
I want to make it clear, like, we were both abusive to each other. I'm not coming off as a nice guy or anything. I don't mean to. But we were mutually abusive. We were in some sort of trauma bond for 25 years. So it was like, you know, we were both violent towards each other, all of this. It was just awful. The only time that it became not awful is when I sought counseling 5 or so years ago. And that's when things started to change, you know, for me, for certain, but for our relationship and everything. And, you know, I just want to make that clear. I'm not trying to come off as a one-sided person, you know, like there's only you know, we were just like I said, a trauma bond, just dysfunctional from the go. And I guess the reason I feel it's so important to talk about this stuff isn't because I have a podcast, but it's because I spent 20 years in a lie, and I spent 20 years projecting this marriage onto other things where people did think, oh, you guys, you know, like people would tell me, I can't believe you and Amy are broken up. I would never have believed that. Never would I think that. And so we did a really good job of presenting something like a satanic wedding or marriage. And it was anything but that. It was very typical, very typical. It was basically our parents' marriage. We were just reliving. And,
it kind of reminds me of when drug addicts are bonded together by their addiction, or others are bonded by something. Perhaps you shared traumas of your family life, or perhaps just simply being Satanists was enough to put you together, because 20 years ago, being a public Satanist was completely different than Twitter Satanist.
Well, for certain, we were both very angry people and hate-filled towards human beings, period. We got the short end of the stick, and we were in the shitty zip codes. And I think Amy wanted to, that hate and anger was part of her identity. I don't like to talk for her. You know, I never have, but I think that was part of the identity there. And when people say we grew apart, I'm not sure we ever grew together. So philosophically, I started seeing things differently. This is when I took Midas right off sale. This is when I started to see within this philosophy some mistakes and pushing them forward. And I think that holding on to hate and not letting go of it is something that I couldn't do anymore. And, you know, it was funny. One of my friends laughed because I came home one day for therapy. I said, oh, you should really go with me. I'm feeling so much better. I'm seeing things differently. And she goes, isn't that nice? And I was like, what the hell?
Your
like
ex said this.
Yeah, isn't that nice? And I sort of laughed because it was sort of like not the response you're expecting when you're telling people you're getting healthier, feeling better. But it was a threat to control, I would imagine. Like, you know, it was a threat to control. I was getting healthy. I was able to start standing up for myself. You know, I can have friends. You can't tell me I can't have friends, and just stuff like that.
I feel frustrated hearing about this, because seeking help and feeling good about it isn't a very hard feat once you do it. It's easier said than done, of course. But the fact that you're basically opening a door and saying, I did it, so can you, and leaving that open invitation, and for it not just to be a door shut, but a door that was basically shut and then, you know, names were written on it or something like that. It feels very hurtful. Like the phrase wasn't so much to reject your offer, but just to hurt you with words.
It was definitely bizarre. And, you know, I'm looking for approval. Like I said, I guess, and I'm not, you know, I don't understand all this stuff, but I go to counselor and psychiatrist and they help me understand it. But I definitely felt like, you know, I guess when you say you married your mom, I guess a lot of people do that. And I guess I felt like, you know, I needed to hear, that's good. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. I needed to hear that all the time, as I'm still, yes, I am a god, but I am still a human being. Okay, people. I'm joking, but this is the way it goes. You still have these flaws you figure out along the way if you're lucky, and that is just, I don't know what I'm even saying now.
You told me
Oh yeah,
another. You
I'm
told.
looking for
Mhm.
I'm looking for the good boy thing. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Excuse me.
Speaking of good boys, you told me another story involving Merry Christmas. I was hoping you might share a little about when you were told Merry Christmas because you received the infamy.
Oh, yeah, this is, and see, this goes to the Me Too movement. I can see the frustration. I remember when I first got with my wife, she would use men's names in her writing. A.E. Crowley, she would use. And this is the nostalgia I talk about, that pathetic nostalgia of wanting to be known, like seen as an evil person, like a Crowley or something. I'll talk about that later, I guess, instead of going forward. But she would use names like that were, A.E. Stocky or something like that. And it was because as a woman, she couldn't be seen. She can only be
Absolutely relatable, by the way.
right. And so I thought it was interesting, and I watched it, and I could see it was true based on what she would show me. Like, watch, if I put my name on this, watch how I'll be treated. And I was like, wow. So I feel for that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I can't make people see you. Like, I can only try to help with that. Like, I think we spoke on the other one of the episodes, like if I'm doing an interview, I try to here talk to them, and they won't. I
Yes.
can't force an interviewer to do that. You're sort of navigating something where you need the publicity, so it's not something you can even argue about. It's what they feel like covering. It's unfortunate, but that's the deal. And so when this incident happened, whenever later on in the years, whenever I started to get attention for my career in the last decade, there was always something that fucking stood in the way, and it was created in our home, drama, problems. And so when the COS and Doug from the Satanic Temple were going back and forth with letters, my name was in those letters. Like, Shane said this, well, Shane said this, so they're both saying my name. And I mentioned that to Amy. I said, oh, look at this. And she goes, well, Merry Christmas. You worried about being forgotten. Now you're immortalized with this. And for me, it's not that big of a deal to me. I wasn't looking for that, but I think, you know, she is, you know, and I don't know what to say about that. Like, not being seen as a woman, I can see how she's frustrated. But I was seen for my accomplishments, stuff I did, stuff I didn't, like stuff I actively pushed forward, I was getting credit for. So it's not like I was getting credit for her work. Quite the contrary. Most of the time, she got credit for my work. And, this is some of the stuff. The reason I wanted to talk here is because, like, all of my shit's being held by her, my writings, 20 years of that stuff. And man, that's just not fair. That's not fair at all. And, then I'll have someone taking credit for my theories, my philosophy, writing their own books based on stuff I had already written. You know, this is basically for me to say, don't trust anything that comes out of there with my name on it, you know? And why the hell is she using my last name still? She never even took it. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. There, I'm going.
No,
I'm like saying
please,
10 different
please
things.
go on. I think this is a clear thing. I'm really sorry that your name is being used as a. I feel like this term is quite a stinging term, but it comes to mind the term clout chaser.
Yeah, that's exactly, and this is like 25 years of sticking up, and defending my ex, and it feels the same way now. I want to defend her. I'm also afraid of saying something that, I'm going to get attacked when I get home. And I don't mean physically attacked, but just made to feel bad, and
Yes.
whatever it was, guilt, not sex, all these weird things that can make you feel really rotten. And so, but ultimately that's exactly what our relationship was, Amy was a wannabe writer, and she, like I spoke of on the Me Too movement, she felt she had to get married to have a future. So she got married to me, but I don't, I mean, as I find out now, there was never any real love there. It was just a marriage of convenience that most women have entered into in our generations
Mm-hmm.
to get out of the home. And when they're on safe ground, they go after the people they lust after and what they really want in life. And when I came back to Chicago, part of that was like to ask my mother, questions about those occult secrets women hold. And she told me that she did that. My grandmother did it. My father's grandmother did it. And it's like every woman she knew did that. So it was like, man, that's fucking, what an awful society we have. Because a woman has to do that, and then she marries some guy and dumps him at 50, puts him on the street,
Yeah.
and he thought that he had something going on. Like I thought I was, in a relationship that I worked for. I thought that's what that was. You know,
Just
eh.
curious, did you feel obliged to be a satanic power couple publicly?
Well, at some point, yes. At some point when we first married, when we first got together, I made a point to tell everyone that they're number two in my life, and my path is number one. I follow that path no matter what, and so don't get in the way of that. And at some point, it did become that. That's what people saw. Look at this creepy guy with this Pollyanna wife, which is how she portrayed herself.
Can you tell our listeners what a Pollyanna is, just in case they're younger than us?
Okay, I guess it's like a woman who says yes to everything. Like, oh, okay, dear, all this like very weak-willed woman.
A kind of 50s woman.
Yeah, right. And man,
Wifey.
what?
Wifey.
Wifey, yeah, exactly. And Amy was anything but that. She comes from, so people see this, and it's a shame. People see Amy as a dumb blonde and invisible, and a very nice and amiable person. And she's from Calumet City. I mean, she used to drive around with bodies in the trunk. I mean, she's a hardcore person. So none of that is true, but that's how people would see her.
I think it's also, and cash me outside for saying this, it's a little of her power as a white woman, because I cannot get away with that same thing, I don't think. That's
Yeah,
quite it's a power I've always been in awe and upset with at the same time.
yeah, she can definitely play. That's probably true. I can't see it from your
But I
perspective.
also can't blame her for behaving that way, because I imagine if I was the same demographic, maybe I would do the same thing to survive.
Yeah, I don't blame. I feel like I thought so highly of her, and I thought she was such a strong woman that it's shocking that she would do the same thing my mother did, my grandmother did, and so on and so forth. I would see her as a very progressive person that would be the first in the Gen X. Like she's like, yeah, I don't need no man. Like I would see her as a progressive, but she wasn't. She was a hanger on, and that's how she's always been in Chicago. And you know, that's the truth of the matter. Like it was all my vision. All like I said, this is first. My path is first, and everything else comes second. And if that's rude to say or not, that was just the truth. That's my truth. Like my path as an artist is first. And I see things differently. I see human beings more as important more than I did when I was younger. But I think part of the sadistic nature of our breakup and the part of the fire I was getting from the other end was probably because she hadn't had any in 25 years. None of this is hers. Like all the stuff she kept is my stuff. It's my legacy. It's my work. It's my vision. None of it's hers, not even the cookbooks. So it's like, I can see why you'd be frustrated, but I
But
also
what have you done?
that's true. I tried to promote her to do her books and write, and I, I can't write it for you, you know, and to be blamed, for any kind of blame, like I took that time, is like ridiculous. It's like, I don't know, I don't know how to, it's like she had enough extracurricular activities that she could have written a couple books, wrote a couple books, in that time.
As occultists and such, you have, especially as an artist, as an occult artist, you have the ability to make something out of nothing. And this is not something that has a limit, I don't think. And I think that while she might have co-opted things you created, as much as that's a blow to your hard work, your pride, your time, all kinds of things, at the same time, I hope it finds you well to be reminded that you're going to create more things. And there's more for you that no one can take from you. And no one can take from you your plans either.
Yeah, I believe that's true, and I have a lot of ideas for the future. And I can look at things a lot of ways. Like, well, you taking all my shit frees me up to move forward, not worry about my archives, my history, and all this stuff that I found important. But I also want my stuff. Like, I want my hard drives. I mean, as an artist, it's unconscionable to me that someone would take my studio supplies, my studio tools, my sculptures.
With absolutely no use for them.
Right. Well, ultimately, I keep saying she, but there's a lot of mirroring going on. That's for certain. I'm betting that Amy will play the artist now, and which is all fine and dandy. Just give me my shit back. I mean, ultimately this year I have to work on getting a lawyer and working on that. I mean, but I just the stealing of my hard drives and weird shit like that is just unconscionable to me. I would have never imagined that someone would do that to me, that would have considered themselves at one time a person that was into art or whatever. It's just like the most bizarre shit.
At that point, it transcends whether you are an artist or she is an artist or not. To me, that is X behavior. Or it reminds me of divorces, of like just suburban divorces.
Yeah.
When a family member dies and everyone fights over the dead person's things that they didn't even care about before the person died.
Oh, that's the worst part of this, is it's so horribly typical. I thought,
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
oh no, it's just like that's the worst part of it, is like all of this like hiding shadow selves. I thought we shared this philosophy where that stuff didn't apply to us. And shock, I think there's LaVey talks about, don't think people around you are like you, are thinking like you. And boy, wasn't that a mistake on my part.
Did she go with you to visit LaVey?
Oh yes.
So
Oh
she
yeah.
was there too.
Yes, she was. That was the big reason why I made that all happen, was I was courting her. Like, I wanted her attention.
So you were not a couple yet.
No.
And this makes an interesting addition to what we were just talking about, your interesting life, your very irreplaceable life, your, all these things that you've experienced from the backbone of your hard work. I read The Satanic Witch this year. It was a birthday present to myself. And I got the one with the foreword from Zena LeVay in it. And a lot of it felt very relatable. And you talk about typical. I'm not trying to roast her, but for her to play a Pollyanna and really not have her own magic without your things or without your name separates her from anything you've done, whether you're a couple or not. For her to be, have the same powers, she has to do more for herself.
Makes sense to me.
There's a page here that I looked at back when we regarded this book, and it says, "I forgive you. Do not ever say that you love me again, or I will not." I'm curious, do you still forgive her?
That's a hard one to. That writing there is like, I forgive you, but don't lie to me one more time. Don't tell me, and I don't have a lot of forgiveness in this right at this. I can't imagine I will ever have forgiveness. And I can't imagine I would ever want to see her again. Ever. She has done the worst that she could do. And I think my biggest problem with talking about this is that this is just what she would want. She wants to be seen and wants to be seen as evil or as the man or as the tough person here.
This sounds like a very philosophical misunderstanding between you two. Like your philosophies over Satanism are completely different.
I think so. I think she's stuck in a nostalgia. Like I said, a nostalgia to repeat something someone else has done. And I'm on a progressive path to add to a philosophy. I'm not trying to repeat it or be seen in it. But when I was seen in it and I got some recognition, I got that recognition for being progressive, not for doing a ritual like Anton LaVey did. I got to be seen because I was progressive, because stuff me and Doug had worked on took off. The Satanic Temple took off, stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely, I would imagine two separate things, but one is theory and one is practice, and I have the practice, I would say,
LaVey was progressive at his time for cleaning up Might Is Right. And I think that you pushed the envelope forward and a few more steps by calling him out, challenging him, and then getting to get to know him, but then going your own way and pushing your own progressive views regarding Satanism.
Yeah, that's true. Here's something I see, I thought about the other day when we were going to record this, that most Satanists will talk about how you can't abuse animals, and that's LaVey had said that. But then they'll say, I hate people and, destroy people. And that's the concept of forgetting that we're animals, which is a big problem with herd mentality or societies. They forget that we have animal instincts. We're a carnal animal. We're animals. And so I think when we spoke about doing this, it was the hardest. That's one of the harder parts too, is to say, well, you sort of failed in this philosophy, or there's these failures, like I put up with that kind of stuff, abuse, let's say, or people would celebrate that abuse as, you're evil. Look at you, you're an evil. Some women, and I brought this up in the Me Too movement, might find joy in a man being destroyed because of all they've been through. But that doesn't seem to fit within a philosophy who says it's not all right to abuse animals. Men are an animal. And, that I have issue with some of that stuff.
It's almost easy to say that there's a chance you might not get your stuff back after releasing this. Do you agree?
Oh, I don't think I'd get it back before I released this.
Okay.
My psychiatrist said, "Do you really think you'll get your hard drives back and they'll work?" I mean, after getting a jacket back with knife holes in the back, um, getting things back that were broken,
Wait a
you know.
minute. I don't think we recorded anything regarding this. When did you receive a jacket with knife holes in the back of it?
Well, part of the deal was, and I shouldn't have done this either, but I, said send me my stuff to Chicago, and of an ex-friend of mine flew out there, I guess, to help Amy load up this bin with my stuff. A fan of mine, not even a friend, and so when it was sent back with all the stuff I asked not to be sent to me, and there was a jacket that Amy had begged for she wanted this jacket of mine. And so there was a bunch of knife holes in the back of it, with a knife sticking out of it. And so, you know,
Oh my goodness. I'm scared hearing about things like that, and I can't help but continue to feel a little scared for you hearing that potential. And while this might be what she wants, at the same time, I think that putting this forward is absolutely crucial, because this is sort of a trail pointing at a history, not just of your art, but a history of you being abused. And I don't think that you should hide behind anything or feel the need to not give her what she wants. She could change her mind of what she wants right away because we're doing this.
yeah, yeah. I, I, I felt the goal here for me is that the understanding that a lot of my family or people that are friends of mine for long, they won't get this because they're not artists, as we've talked before. Like between artists, we have a different life than most people, but it's not recognized by most people. But as an artist, I have a legacy to protect. And that's what I care about with all of my actions. I have an integrity, and I walk through and do my artwork understanding it's part of my history. And when I die, that's my finished work. Like I'm a life artist. So when I die, that's when I won't be able to see my finished work. Someone else will, but I won't. And so it's important for me to cut this history off here and say you can't trust anything out of that household with my name on it. And I would say even possibly with her name on it, it could be my writings that she's taking from. I have 20 years of writing is on 8 hard drives that I'm not getting back. I have a ton of stuff there, and so it's important for me to control my narrative. It's not. It doesn't. I don't know if this will benefit me at all, or her or not. But it's just important for me to have my say in this situation, for my side of things, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, definitely. We're in an era where we can contact just about anybody. We can contact you on Twitter. We can contact this podcast on Twitter or through Gmail. And it amazes me that nobody seems to have gone to you to ask, hey, this person said this and this, what's up with that? Or perhaps the idea of authentication might be necessary. And
Well, but
while you're a living artist, you have that authority, I believe.
yeah, and Amy's a real smart person. She's really smart. She knows just what she's doing in all aspects of it. So if someone's, like it's easy to call me crazy because I communicate in a brute way and not a a formally educated way. And a lot of my artwork is emotional, so I could be called crazy at the drop of a hat. I've gone to a therapy and a psychiatrist for the last year, and neither of them would diagnose me as anywhere near crazy. Um, and so, yeah, people wanting to take things that Amy might say and use it against me. are the same people who are going to come to your house and see a piece of paper on the floor, even though you cleaned your house for 4 weeks before they got there. They came over not to hang out with you. They came over to see a piece of paper on the floor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so that's, interpretation be damned. I can't worry about that stuff, how people will see it. You know, I have to worry about admitting like we were both abusive, you know, like that's true. I don't know why we stuck together as long as we did, but to trauma bond and stuff like that, you know. But I should have known at the first violence in our relationship, Amy woke me up kicking my head in because I sent an email to a friend of mine, and then the next girlfriend of mine, and the next week, like I had grabbed her by the neck. So it's like we had a fucking a relationship that wasn't like what we presented. It was all a lie. And so when I talk about the goal of this stuff, part of that is to set straight my artistic projection and stuff, because it's like, you know, what is art? And people answer that in a lot of ways, but for me, there's an honesty to it. And so presenting that what I figured out this was after counseling and stuff like that is important to me, because I would hate someone to be influenced by the marriage that we had. It's not probably a good thing to be influenced by.
If not all art, it sounds like she practiced her own form of black magic with the lies, the illusions that she created.
Yeah, certainly. I guess you could call it black magic, but it fits like a thing of they call grooming. Grooming, a person grooming their victim and understanding, picking their victim out of a crowd and grooming them, and that's just what she did, you know. And so, yeah, you could call it black magic, or just being smart enough to pick the perfect person that you understand is going to be able to be under your thumb. You know, Amy understood that a poor person, a person without a father influence, you know, she would say this about people all the time, they're easily put under your thumb.
That's what gangs and cults do also, to choose members.
Right, and that's how she saw like people of color, mainly black men, like, oh, they're easy to control because they don't have a father figure usually in the house, and you know, the mother's strong, so they'll listen to a strong woman. And that's sort of what I fell under, is that kind of, I wish it were black magic. It's just like typical suburban shit, like you were saying earlier.
It's white woman magic.
Yeah, you can call it magic, but it's like the science. I feel like magic is something you can't answer, like art. Like,
and I guess that's where, yeah, the generalization of it as black magic doesn't fit either.
yeah, because
when people leave something like a cult, like either from deprogramming, or they leave something such as being a white nationalist or any sort of cult-like political view, oftentimes they're advised by other former people from those lifestyles to completely cut off all contacts involving those philosophies. And it kind of sounds like you went through a similar thing after years of grooming.
yeah, I just, boundaries help me cut things off. Like those are amazing little things, to have a value system within yourself, and boundaries. Like, you can't talk to me that way. I've said nothing of the sort. You know, to be able to say that back to someone who is yelling at you for having a friend that happens to be a female, you know, in a jealous rage, you know, to be able to say, I'm allowed to have friends. There's nothing going on, you know. This person's done nothing to you. You know, to be able to say that was a good moment for me, you know.
I wouldn't imagine our podcast would be possible if you were still together.
Oh no, I remember when you wrote me originally, that was none of the bone of contention, like, because I was getting attention again for stuff that, whatever. It was a weird thing. I just never saw it coming. I just saw this person as something that I wanted to see. I fooled the black magic was on me. I fooled myself. Like I created this illusion to fulfill these holes in myself, like the love and protection my mother didn't give me, all those weird things you find out in therapy. You sort of I created this this illusion. you know I Amy didn't create the illusion. She's going about her business in a real outrageous public way that I turned a blind eye to. So it's on me. It's on me, all this stuff. And why did I ignore it? All that weird shit. Most of my career has been me working at being successful so my parents finally see me. Stuff like that. What a waste of life that is. I've done good. I mean, I've had a lot of accomplishments, but at the same time, were they even for me? Or was it just, I feel like all that shit from all that stuff is just me climbing a mountain, just me going, look at me, I'm the king of the hill. I did it just to do it. It had nothing to do with me. It had to do with all these other things, Some of it had to do with me, like my political makeup, my political character, I feel is me. The things I fight for or espouse, those are me in my root. But I don't know.
In the 2016 election, did you both have the same political candidate in mind? Just by curiosity.
No.
Interesting.
No, Amy voted for the Green Party. And I shouldn't be telling her vote. But we used to do things so much publicly. Everything was public. So it was in our marriage that would never have mattered if I had said something like that. We talked about, so now I feel like maybe I shouldn't. But yeah, I voted for Hillary Clinton because Bernie Sanders asked me to. And Noam Chomsky says if you vote against the Democrats, you vote against poor people. He agrees that it's a shitty thing to have only two parties, but you have to vote Democrat if you want poor people to eat. And so that's why I voted for Hillary Clinton. But if you're getting at like Amy is definitely would be the conservative of our house. I would call her the hanging judge. She was the hanging judge in our house.
I actually wasn't driving at her political preference. To me, that doesn't matter so much. But I guess I was curious because ever since I've met you, you've been very loyal toward a lot of ideas that Bernie Sanders has pushed forward. And what I'm hearing about your relationship with her, it almost sounds like she would have wanted those ideals to cease because they wouldn't benefit her.
Well, I'm not sure. I wish I could understand what the hell was going on in her head. I definitely saw what I'm talking about here. I know that we were splitting philosophically on what a Satanist is or what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And she was placed firmly in the might is right camp. And I was not. And I'm not saying I'm not, but I also see that work as being so old, it's almost out of date. It doesn't matter anymore. We're in a new era. And so my head is in the future.
Sometimes holding on to the regressive views as women is hurtful in the long run. And it's a little bit puzzling to me that she would hold on to regressive ideas when she always has come off to me as a feminist. And it feels very much like a lot of unfortunately blonde white women who decided out of nowhere to push for the alt-right or something like that because being on the left, they didn't get to be the center of attention. So they decide to become a Tomi Lahren or others that kind of fit the same Lauren Southern, all these alt-right ladies who didn't make it on the other side. So this is a good, like, short-term payoff for them to get that infamy.
I would say that, she is a feminist of her generation and her mother's
Okay.
generation, but I don't think those are the same feminist of today.
No, no. Feminism often had exceptionalisms into other generations,
Right.
understandably.
Yeah. And so, I'm not really threatened by a lot of like that stuff because it is regressive. It's like, it's not adding to, I'm into the future. And so, you know, I'm not, I'm not bothered by that stuff is all I'm saying. But I am, I'm not into those politics.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what you'd call a feminist who is okay with people like wanting people to still open doors for them. Like I don't know what that's called, but I know modern feminists and women aren't into that.
Um, a side anecdote. My husband opens the doors for me, and it's just been that way. And one time I saw someone who apparently went to the same store as us to get groceries, and it was on chance a day that I did not have my husband with me. I was the driver, I was all alone. And the woman came over and confronted me to ask me, "Why do you let him open doors for you?" And it was an odd question because it wasn't something I actually considered. And I'm sort of cemented in ideas that no, if you ask me to smile, I might get a little mad about it. But at the same time, I guess if someone chose to be kind, I'm not going to shit on it either. And it still is befuddling to me what the definition of feminism is, because there's a lot of anger driven reactions to men's actions, but then there's a lot of actions toward cultural differences amongst women that I think that feminism is quite divided and should be redefined in more finer points, I think, in 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
We're coming to a close of this episode, but I wanted to ask you, is there anything else you wanted to say before we put this to rest and you live your new life?
I don't know. I hope there's something I'm not missing. It's all a blur to me, this whole thing. I think I made it clear as to why I'm doing this. I hope I did. You know, um, and if I would like my name to quit being used, like, the Bugby name. I don't, stuff like that. But I hope I made that clear. You know.
It's an interesting and sort of, I'm using the word awesome in the literal sense, an awesome idea that this book that I'm quoting from is pure dynamite. Bugby, Bugby, Bugby.
Oh, that's what LeVay said. That's right.
And your friend back in season 1 had said that this book is going to cause death. And I didn't think about how dangerous this book is until I considered all of the context involved in it. And now this book is quite frightening to read.
It is?
Yes.
Can you tell me why?
I feel frightened for you in this book. Not frightened for you in the present, but what you went through in the past. And it's incredibly pointed, and it sounds very much, it reminds me of a lot of the feelings I used to have in hindsight when I was a victim of something. The things I wished I said to the people who hurt me, and the things that I still scream into the night. And this has that feeling to it. I want to sincerely thank you for mustering the courage to do this episode. This was quite a long time coming, and we made it. We made it, buddy. We got there. And I really hope that this brings you relief after we air this, and you get 2020 to be your year.
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, I'm excited about 2020.
I do want to offer to my listeners here, well, I'm sorry, I do want to offer our listeners here that if you feel like this is a relatable problem and you need to get out of a problem such as this, you can visit thehotline.org. That's the HOTLINE.org. This is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and it involves emotional as well as physical abuses, and it has a good section showing, are you the aggressor or are you the victim? And they do have a live chat within it, and you can get help even if you can't talk on the phone. I've been Nannerl, and this is Shane Bugbee. This book I've been reading from again is called The Tangible Formula for Love and Loss, Despair and Joy, and the Triumph and Failure of the Collective Will, Part 1. I really look forward to your Part 2, because as cold as this one, I imagine so much light and warmth in the next one.
Absolutely. After I left, part of the street art scene, Amy made these stickers that say pastry knife, the knife of kindness. Basically saying her making pastries is her knifing you. You know what I mean? Like the knife of kindness, pastry knife. And so that's what this doctor would say. Like, your wife is feeding you all these pastries. You're obviously overweight. It's not good for you. She doesn't have your best interest at heart. Read this story. And it was about like a woman leading to a man to pastries to kill him. And so, that was, those are all awful things to realize,
Did you ever confront her regarding the pies or the pastry knife?
Well, the pastry knife happened after I left. After I left, she made these stickers up and put them around Portland, and some people sent me photos of them where she was admitting to being that her new handle was pastry knife, the knife of kindness. And so she's getting off on letting people know that she did this stuff, and so that's what I worry about when I talk about it on here. Like, I don't want to give her that gift, but yes, if you ask about this, I'm like, I don't want to do the 9 days of pie. I would say that often because it became about everything but my birthday. It became about everything else. I wasn't being celebrated. I wasn't having a good time because it became public and people were coming over. And of course I would say, please don't feed me this stuff. I shouldn't be eating this stuff. I lost a bunch of weight and she would make a bunch of cookies for it and I'd ask her not to. It turned into, I don't know if I told you this, but she sent a lover up there, up to the house to smoke weed with me when I quit smoking weed. And, so she was just hell bent on, her control is also controlling the end of the story. Like the end of the story works out better for her, that she's a good person, took care of this poor person, all this. And, she wanted that story to tell. That's what I think. It's an odd thing to have things go on behind your back and you think you got, you know all this stuff. And then, this secret life comes out. And then it's bizarre as fuck because it's like, not like, oh, you're gay? Well, how happy am I for you? Something like, like if someone you're with and they come home and like, I'm gay. I've been gay for 10 years. We've been married. I'm gay. Like for that, I'd be like happy. I'd be like, a little weird, but I'm happy for you. It couldn't be like that with this. There was just these layers of shadow shit that was like, oh my God. I don't know.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune in to our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. for Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit ShaneBugby.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugby. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and ShaneIsTheDevil.com.